Artist Talk. For those of you who don't know, my name is Lauren Davidson. I am the curator and founder of Museum Nectar Art Consultancy, and I am the curator of this show, this lovely show, with artists Candice Tavares and Vanessa Villarreal. And this show, as you know, is entitled Skin Deep. This was an idea that I've been kind of simmering and percolating on for a while, just to kind of consider not only Black beauty, but where the beauty of women of color is right now in our society, in our world, and how we see ourselves. Really kind of taking a look at it through a personal lens rather than all the many lenses that have eyes on us. And so some of this came from me growing up. As I grew up, my mother was a beautician back then. That's what we used to call a beautician. So I always had beauty around me. You know, I would sit in the shop and watch her do hair, and she was always a very glamorous woman, and still is at 90. And I just looked to her for my cues on how to care for myself. But it goes beyond the skin, right? It's beyond skin deep. It goes to how you really care for your inner being and your inner self. And I think so much of what we as Black women and as women of color have to experience in society kind of chips away at that oftentimes, how people see us. And so when considering this show and who I wanted to kind of bring these ideas to the forefront so that we can really have a conversation about it, I thought of these two amazing women. And first, Candice and I had worked together before, and she has a very clear vision of celebrating Black beauty. And so I thought it fit in so well with the concepts that I had and the ideas that I was thinking about. And Vanessa's work, and I've told you this several times, your work reminds me of my mother so much. You take kind of a vintage perspective on beauty in many ways, and draws in a lot of the cultural perspective as you know, African American people and diasporic people growing up, and things that we've seen and experienced. And I think you can see quite a bit of that in her work as well. So first, I'd like both of you to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your inspirations and work, and then we'll get into it.
Well, my name is Candice Tavares, and I create woody art. I really love the use of wood to depict Black women, because I feel like wood is a really natural medium. There's lots of variation in how wood naturally comes. The different grains, the knots, the waves, and the way that wood does its thing. And I think that all of those things make it more beautiful. Like when we see wood and we see the variations in the grain, that's what we are attracted to. That's what we think is so beautiful. And I think that is reminiscent of women, especially Black women, that, the things that make us different, the differences in our hair and our complexion and even the texture of our skin and the way that we are shaped and formed, I think all of those things really make us so beautiful. So using a natural medium and letting the natural grain of that natural medium shine through to reflect on the natural beauty that resides in all of us, it just felt right to me.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Villarreal, whichever one. And I am a mixed media artist. And for me, I draw my inspiration just from my lived experiences, and the shared lived experiences of many Black people and Black women, especially. And for me, mixed media just makes the most sense, given that I've always practice and experimented with different mediums, from crocheting to sewing. Most recently is painting, and just to be able to incorporate all of them to tell a story in a way that's more tangible, and in a way that really just helps set the mood and tone, is what I want my work to do. And so I try to capture a moment, tell a story, and allow viewers to, relate to it in the ways that it best resonates with them and their personal stories. And I create work for Black women especially to feel seen and to see themselves in the work, sometimes literally, through the mirror pieces. And yeah, I look forward to continuing to do more of that and stretch myself as it relates to the materials I use in my pieces.
Thank you. Yeah. So let's dial it back to your youth or growing up, because both of you have very strong perspectives of Black female beauty in particular. Where did that come from for you guys, for each of you? Vanessa, we can start with you.
I think about this a lot because I feel like so much of my childhood, in the very beginning, there were so many changes in terms of my relationship with beauty. But I will say, first and foremost, my mom still just, beauty wasn't really a focus. It never was. It never really is a physical beauty. More so how inside.
Yeah.
And my mom, being the Black woman that she is, and very unapologetic in the way that she shows up, for me, that superseded everything. And so, when it came to just physical appearance, I think her just affirming me as a Black little girl and affirming my identity, and that really went a long way. But then there comes the environment, society, and for me, the point, when we moved, so I'm from Central Florida originally. We first lived in Orlando, and then we moved to Kissimmee. When I grew up in Orlando, very diverse. The kids were really nice in Orlando, from my experience. And then when we moved to Kissimmee, that's when things took a turn for me as it relates to just how I perceive myself and being self-conscious and like my esteem to an extent, because we moved to Kissimmee is predominantly Latin American and Hispanics, and for the first time I felt out of place, which is weird because my dad's an immigrant from Canada.
Right.
So I was like, where I felt like there was supposed to be a connection, there wasn't, and that was because of my physical appearance. People don't assume, like her parents or her dad's Panamanian and whatnot. To them, I was just like literally like the awkward Black girl. So I was very awkward too, very just like to myself, timid, and I internalized so much of that in middle school, especially because I was ostracized.
Yeah.
And it took, and it still is taking a lot of unlearning just what beauty is, and embracing my beauty, and just the fact that who I am because of how I appear, and
Right.
even little things like my hair now, like for the longest, up until June, I had to have my hair stretched out. If you have coils and things, and for the first time, I'm like embracing the shrinkage, and that little things like that mean so much because that's something that I've struggled with a lot because of my experiences.
And I think that a lot of folks who are not within our community, they don't understand, even those in our community sometimes don't really understand these nuances, right? They're very different, and because they don't get a lot of airplay, quote unquote, people don't know the things that as Black women we have to deal with, especially when it comes to our hair and our practices to maintain, however we keep our hair. And just going back to your point about being Afro-Caribbean, Latina, that perspective is never seen. And I have Caribbean heritage as well, being from Jamaica, and I think that adds a completely different layer also, because then you get into, beauty from whose perspective? Are you light enough? Is your hair straight enough? It's, all of those things kind of contribute to how you form. So for you to have such a strong, perspective in your art practice is a wonderful thing, but it is also, I would imagine, a cathartic, kind of working through these ideas.
Yeah. I'd say a lot of it, I give credit to my mom and my mom's side of the family because growing up culturally, she was the dominant. Like her parents are African American, and then her mom is Afro-Caribbean of Jamaican descent, and that was what we grew up like culturally. That was our upbringing, and so all my life when I thought of women, I thought of these black women.
Yeah.
And I spent all my time with my mom's side of the family. My step grandma, who's a Southern woman from Georgia, to me, beauty, they always were the standard of beauty.
Yeah.
Until things changed, but even now, I'm reclaiming that. And I don't think it changed really, but I started just to think more, overthink. But they've always been the standard of beauty for me, and my art, I think naturally, it just reflects that because that's what I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Candace, what inspires you as far as growing up and seeing women in your life? How did that shape your perspective?
I think, to be honest, I grew up in a household where physical appearance was not the focus. Like, I can distinctly remember there would be like these little mailings for like the Little Miss Whatever pageant, and I'd be like, ooh, I can fail. And my dad was like, what are you doing? Like, it is not about what you look like. It is about how smart you are.
Yeah.
It is about the type of person that you are when you show up into the world. And so that was always the focus in my household. Now, that being said, I grew up with a lot of cousins, and we were all different complexions and different shapes. And I think the message that I got, not from within my family or within my household, but I think within like the larger community, was that lighter and smaller was beautiful, was desirable. And it took me, I think, time in growing up to be like, no, actually, like, this shade of brown that I am is beautiful, and I like it just the way it is, and I don't want to be any lighter than I am. And if I get darker in the sun, that's great, because like I am me, and that me being me is beautiful. And I think that my desire to make the standard of beauty within the Black community more inclusive is what really informs my art.
Yeah.
I think so often we get caught up into this narrative of like light skin versus dark skin, and whatever camp you like people tell you that you fit into, like that's what's best. And that's not something that I ever want to be a part of. Like, I've gotten the, oh, you're pretty for a dark skin girl, and I'm like, oh no, I'm just pretty. But I would never want to like take that back and like say something that was negative about another complexion. So in the art that I create, the reason that I use so many different shades of brown with every figure is that I really want every Black woman to see themselves and feel seen and feel like their brown is beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's not that you need to be any other shade than what you are. Like, you as you are showing up in the world are beautiful. You don't have to compare, and there's room for all of us to be equally beautiful.
Right. And I noticed even with this kind of curatorial approach that I took, several of your works are focused on hair. So what does that mean for you, and how it always comes out in your work? And I love the different textures that you're able to achieve with the woods that you use, but why focus
hair?
on that? Why hair?
I think hair is, it's like a big point of contention, I think, in our community. So I grew up going to predominantly white schools. And I always had long hair, but it was like long and like a lot. My hair was a lot. It was like really huxtable, but like not teen. And like when I was a kid, like I was like, well, why isn't my hair like Alana's hair? Alana's hair is like straight and easy, and black hair is like not. That's not what I my experience. And even like going to the hairdressers, every hairdresser was not happy to have me sit in their chair. There were some that were like, girl, it's a lot trying to comb your hair out. I'm not really feeling it. And I mean, I wore my hair straight for most of my life. I didn't start wearing my hair naturally curly until I was in graduate school. So for most of my life, it was trying to figure out how do I keep this hair that is not naturally straight, looking straight for the world, because that's what's presentable.
Right.
That's what
Right.
is professional.
Right.
That's what's acceptable. And then as I kind of got older, I was like, well, actually, like when my hair is wet, it's curly, and that curl pattern is actually pretty. Like I like the way it looks. And coming into like full appreciation, I think, of that aspect of like myself made me want to celebrate it for myself and for other people, and to show the different textures of hair that, like, yeah, you can have like wavy curly hair, and that's great and that's beautiful, but also you can have really tightly coiled textured hair, and that's also really beautiful. Like having all of that represented in the work that I create makes it feel like I'm doing my little part to make every Black woman who looks in the mirror and sees hair growing out of their head feel comfortable with whatever shape
it is.
or texture their hair grows out as.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a way of, in both of your practices, it's a way of asserting yourself in that space, right? A way of asserting yourself in the beauty space, but also just to be yourself. You know, I think for so long, Black women especially have not been the focus of beauty campaigns, or and it's hard to see ourselves in mainstream America, mainstream really globally. How do you think, other than, I think hair is such a controversial topic, and so many of us did not come to these realizations that our natural hair is beautiful until we were older. But how else do you see us asserting ourselves in this space of, this is who I am, take it or leave it? I think that, there's a lot of things percolating now about, so how do you feel like?
So it's funny because most of her work, a lot of it has hair, focuses on hair, not focus, and then there's like barely hair in some of my work.
Yeah.
And I think when I approach that, especially like with these pieces, the bonnet and the do-rag, one, I incorporated those. I started the series as a series focused on rest and how Black women especially naturally, when we're in our resting state, oftentimes we have a bonnet on or a do-rag to protect our hair. But also, I'm also reminded of just the fact that Black women are policed not only with our hair, but like with a bonnet. Like we can't even cover our hair because now people are saying like, oh, you shouldn't leave the house with the bonnet or this, that, and the third. And so I think with the work that I'm creating, it's all about embracing who we are outside of the lens of anybody but our own. I can't even just say outside of like the white lens, but men in general. Like, who we are
Absolutely.
as, and how we perceive ourselves and how we choose to show up as Black women, independent of the perspective and views of everyone else. And then so for me, it's like, if we want to show up in a bonnet or in a do-rag, like that should be just as embraced, because that's.
So I'm going to push a little bit. I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that, because I think we come from different generations, right? Like I said, my mom is 90, and even at almost 50 years old, if I ever went in the street with a bonnet on, my mother would be like, I'm sorry, where you going? Where you going? Right? And I think it has become so commonplace. And for me, and it's not that it's not your right to present yourself however you feel in that space, in the space, but to make it very plain, you don't wear house clothes outside. And that's how I feel about that. I mean, unless you're coming from the hairdresser, you have a special occasion that night. You gotta, I've come out of the hairdresser with my hair pinned up in a wrap,
But I think that really comes from, like, a lens of respectability politics, right?
Yes,
like,
I do agree with that.
Black people, because our lives were inherently not valued, had to make sure that we show up in a specific way. And I mean, even like today, right, in healthcare, I work in healthcare, you will see Black people dress up to come to a doctor's office, to come to a hospital, putting on makeup to come to the ER. Not because they feel like they need makeup, but because they want to feel like, they want the people that meet them where they are to feel like they have worth and value. And we have been ingrained to believe that you have to show up as your very best self, look the most presentable that you can, for people to respect you and value you enough for you to get what you just deserve for simply being.
Yeah.
And so, while I don't necessarily walk outside with a bonnet on, I do start driving to work, start one and then take off the parking lot. But I think like that is part of that swing to feel like, no, I can show up as I am, is like a rebellion against this idea that like I have to earn your respect. I have to earn my inherent value. And really, we should not have to do that. We should be able to show up as we are, just as we are, and get the same level of care, the same level of respect. But we don't. And I think where you see people saying, I'm just going to show up as I am, is because they're like, I'm so frustrated that I have to do all of these extra things for you to just give me the bare minimum, basic level of respect, that I'm just not playing your game anymore. And the truth is, even when we do all these things, when we show up as our best selves, when we put on all the makeup and we have all of the accoutrement to show up into the world, we still aren't given the same level of respect and care that everybody else is. So at some point, it's like, well, why?
Yeah, no, and I get that. And I'm glad that you brought that up because, first of all, I absolutely agree with the respectability politics of it all. But I also feel like the pendulum swings. I feel like, you know, the bonnet could be a radical protest of self-assurance and self-assertiveness. But then you swing the pendulum to the other side and you almost have, you have women of color who are presenting themselves in a completely artificial way. And it's almost the opposite spectrum of what you're saying. As far as, and my friends and I chat about this all the time, what do you think has occurred to influence so many young women and some older women to choose artificial beauty? To go under the knife or to, whatever that beauty application is, the lashes, the this, the that are just so overdone, in my opinion, to change their bodies in such a way that they're almost unrecognizable.
I mean, it's an unpopular opinion, but for me, I think a lot of that comes from a lack of self-confidence and a desire to be appreciated and to receive external validation. And there are some people, I'm sure, that do all those things because they just personally want it, like that's what they like themselves and they want that for themselves. But I think there are a lot of other people who just have not seen what they naturally look like be valued on a larger scale outside themselves, that they feel like they need to change who they are so that somebody else will say, you're really beautiful, you're really desirable, you're really valuable. And they haven't heard that enough for just showing up as they are, that they feel like they need to alter themselves to get those words of affirmation that they weren't otherwise receiving.
Yeah.
And to add on, I think this could be controversial for sure because, I've heard people saying, I wanted it for myself and whatnot, and I'm not taking that away from them. But when thinking about the ways that people choose to modify their bodies, there's always or most times a standard. So I'm thinking, for example, I'm just starting like a rhinoplasty. Why is it that our nose is smaller, more front? Again, it's Eurocentrism at the end of the day. Whether we want to believe it or not, because thinking about just the nose, for example, I think the nose is such a prominent part of our bodies and our face, and it says so much about our culture. Like, most cultures, the nose is not fine and small and, and so I think subconsciously, just Eurocentrism is what there's always going to be a standard of beauty, and what that standard is, is going to affect how we, or can affect how we view ourselves. And the extent we want to go to, you know, feeding into that.
Yeah.
And
I think there's a lot of Eurocentric, obviously the influence is primary, but the male gaze as well.
yes.
Because, you know, when we're looking at women who modify their bodies, they're modifying the parts of their body that seem to be more most attractive to men. And I think it goes back to your point about being, having self-confidence and having, you know,
Where do you get that validation from?
Yes.
Does it come from within, or does it come from what other people say about you? And if it comes from what other people say about you, then as the trend changes, you're chasing that trend to continue to get that external validation from other people that,
Yeah.
like, the way you show up in the world is appealing.
yeah. Yeah. Because it's interesting to me, you know, when we're talking about global beauty, it's even, you would think that, say, a primarily African nation, so Ghana, West Africa, wherever you want to be, would have their own standards of beauty, right? But yet, there's still the Eurocentric focus.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, I love that your work is speaking to the opposite of that, and the, you know, being confident in yourself as you are. But, you know, one day I hope that we move away from that. And I mean, it's interesting. It's a psychosis in my opinion, because it's not only black women, it's Asian women using bleaching creams, it's, you know, South Asian women, it's people of color all over the world. So what's it gonna take?
I think it comes from like seeing references of beauty from a very young age that are valued on a global scale that look widely different. I think you have to have lots of different people and lots of different shapes and lots of different colors being touted as beautiful, and like pound that into kids' heads.
Yeah.
So they can see little pieces of themselves in all of these images of beauty and hold on to that and use that to help build up their confidence. Because the reality is that you do like get it from, you know, what you see. That's why people say representation matters so much.
Yeah.
So we need to have more of a wide scale of representative beauty.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think this is where art
Yes.
is so important.
Yes.
And like even for me, thinking about my experience growing up, I do not see black figures in art at all. And just seeing how people interact with these pieces and other incredible black artists that I know in the area, and how they feel affirmed and they express that,
Yes.
like it's so important. It goes a long way. Like when a little girl sees another little black girl, it's rare, unfortunately, but I'm seeing it more and more.
Yeah.
And seeing literally like their faces light up
Yeah.
when they see themselves in the work. And so, yeah, just to
Yeah.
second what she said, it's so important that in art and media's art as well, any way that we're being represented visually, it's important that black and brown and women of color, girls of color,
See themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and just to kind of dovetail on that, particularly with the piece that you have in the corner where the lovely Gia is standing. You know, I think that piece, and remind me of the title of that piece again?
A labor of love.
A Labor of Love. I think it speaks to that. Can you talk a little bit more about that work?
Yes, I love talking about it. I spoke to it recently with Adrian because that piece is so personal and so special to me because I wanted to capture just like that dynamic and intimate. You know, sometimes it can be frustrating, I'm not gonna lie, because not all the girls, I'm putting myself back together here, but I know that we spend so much time together at that moment. And it's so important because I think that's where it's just like that, where we started to understand just like aspects of beauty as it relates to our hair and getting it done and whatnot. That's like kind of where it started. And so for me, like that piece, I incorporated elements of my childhood from the Daxtries. I know some black people use Blue Magic. It was Daxtries for us. Daxtries.
Blue magic for me.
Daxtries. The Care Bear. I don't know, Care Bears in the early 2000s is just a thing. And then the Little Tights table set. Yeah, for my sister, like that was just, I don't know, like demarking
Yeah.
point of our childhood. And then incorporating the mirror piece so that people and little girls can see themselves in the work. But I also painted it in the perspective of the mother, so that you can also take on the role of the mother or caregiver,
Providing the care.
doing the care. So it's kind of like you can take on two roles in one with this piece.
Yeah, I love that.
Thank
I
you.
love that. Yeah. How do you think social media, what role do you think social media plays in all of this?
I think that social media is doing a terrible job in giving people points of reference with which to compare themselves. Because you see these pictures, they are filtered, they are photoshopped, they are not real. They are snapshots in time of what people want you to perceive their life as. And then people take that back and compare it to their own reality.
Right.
And they don't measure up often. And then it feeds them to want to like chase after a false perception of what is real.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
No, 100% agree. I will say too, though, more children have easy access to that world,
Yeah.
which is where, yes, what's being portrayed or what's being depicted in social media, yeah, what she said is just not accurate. But it's also important that we're not exposed to it so early on, because I'd say I didn't have social media at all until I graduated high school. My parents were adamant about that. I also didn't care about it either.
It didn't exist when I was in high school.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And I think that, and I'm so grateful because growing up, for most of my life, like, I didn't know what to stand towards on social media, so it was like, whatever. I was the nerdy little girl, and I was okay with that, and I was pretty confident in high school despite, going through that awkward phase. But unfortunately, like, I see the younger and younger generation, they're like 6 years old, exposed to,
Yeah.
and
Or they're being put in front of the camera.
or that too.
They're
It's
being put in front of the camera as a generating funds for their parents in some cases.
Absolutely.
But it's also forming, in my opinion, it's forming their personal perspective on their own beauty, right? Or their own just self-value.
Right.
Like if you don't have a certain number of likes, it's not going to be, they're not going to be justified in
What does that say about you?
what does it say about you? Right? I think there was a Black Mirror, if you watched Black Mirror, on one of those streaming lines. And people literally walked around with a visualization in glasses of how many likes they had. And they were valued, they couldn't get car insurance or they couldn't buy a house depending on how many likes that they had. And I really hope that we're kind of recognizing this pathology in society and that we're moving away from that. But I think in speaking about beauty and what is beauty? And beauty is not just skin deep, obviously, as we all know. It's inner beauty as well. So how can we, to your point, contribute to these images and to this discussion about what is really beautiful, and kind of generate that in these children? And I feel like we're going to have a whole generation of children that are just going to be completely lost. And I hope something turns around, but it's not very encouraging where we are now, with the BBLs and the lashes and the this and the that.
Yeah, I think thinking about it, the first thing that comes to mind is just, I just had like, my mind went blank.
You had a total break for it.
Yeah, I did. So let me think more.
Okay, we can. But in talking about, where do we go from here? Go, you got it.
Sorry, okay. I think it really just starts with how, and this might sound cliche, but how you show up. And there's so much, emphasis already on media and whatnot on how people look. but through everyday interactions, it's like how that person makes you feel
Yeah.
that really matters. I don't know
Yeah.
why I'm getting emotional. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I'm like an emotional wreck, so if I like cry.
It's okay.
But I think what it is like there's so many beautiful people,
Yeah.
and they're beautiful because of the way they
They are.
And I hope that in the future, I think social media kind of like has made it harder for people to really have intentional face-to-face interactions. But I just yearn for more little girls, just younger people in general, to have those interactions, in-person interactions, where they feel something and it makes them think, oh, you know what, it's not about our parents, it's like it's how we show up and how we treat other people and how we make other people feel. Because unfortunately with the pandemic and with social media, it's just so hard now. Like we don't,
It's
like
isolated.
when I was growing up, the little kids, when we would play, like everybody was outside together all the time. The community was a community, and like now, I don't see kids playing outside with each other, interacting with their peers, or like, you know, there's not much guidance.
Yeah.
And that's just so important.
I think I think a lot of the emotion comes from we know it could be what it could be, and we want to see children and our children in particular be emotional people in a good way that are empathetic and connect with others in a way that's positive, and validating each other, as we've been talking about, this validation piece, but getting the validation from our peers and people who care and love us, you know. So it is emotional because I think we see the ship kind of sinking.
I think also part of it is as adults, right? You know, even when you see like a baby, right? You'll say, oh, like, oh, that's such a cute kid. Oh, look at the pretty girl. You know what I mean? Like we talk about physical appearance so much when we refer to children, especially little girls. Like, what would the world look like if instead of the first thing you said when you saw a little girl was, oh, look at you, you're so pretty, or I like your dress, or your hair's so pretty. Say, oh, you're so kind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you're such a nice person.
Right.
Oh, you're so smart. Oh, you were so helpful just now. Oh, you shared so nicely. Like if we started to place emphasis on the things that really matter, people would rise to the occasion to get the praise for the things that really matter, instead of trying to rise to the occasion to get the praise for the physical stuff that people, you know,
really
talk about that doesn't really matter.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, it's interesting because I see, you know, celebrities now, you know, like Lizzo, and you know, they are kind of approaching this topic of value, self-value, and putting yourself in the world in an extreme way. And I think it's good for all of us to see different people, different shapes, sizes, colors, everything. But how do you feel about the focus, bringing attention to these topics through celebrity? Is it something that do you think is really a positive effect on our society?
I think with celebrities, there can be a positive effect, and obviously negative effects too. I think where the issue really resides is people, or from what I've seen, they become an idol to the point where it's like, okay, they probably did this with the intention of like stirring the pot and letting people, you know, introspection and whatnot, but then they become like the model for it.
Yes.
And they become just like the focus, like they're the face of this, that, and the third, and it's like, okay, but what are you doing internally or in your day-to-day life to make that change and, you know, see the change and make the impact that you want? And so I think it can be instrumental, like the use of celebrities to push these narratives and whatnot. But I just see so much idolization. When it comes to celebrities, it really just takes away from it, honestly.
I hear you. Yeah. Your thoughts about that?
I think that, you know, a celebrity salad should you eat and what should you leave here because it's actually rotten.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful analogy.
Right.
I'm gonna start using that. Yeah. Fruit salad.
But I think that part of it is that people get so caught up in the celebrity that they are not able to sift through the good and the bad of like Vanessa was saying, the good and the bad of what the people bring.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is what's bad. And that isn't necessarily about celebrity. That is about people having a discerning mind to be able to pull out the good and the bad of what any person says.
Yeah.
Because we all are human and we all have the capacity to say things that are really wonderful and profound, and also say and do things that are like really jacked up. No person is fully good or bad.
Of course,
right? Every person has like
there's a
the good and the
spectrum.
bad. Yeah, there's a spectrum.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able, like as an intelligent, discerning human, to be able to pull out what is good from any person. And when you can't do that, that's when you run into problems.
Right. Yeah. So kind of shifting the topic a little bit, and I want to speak to you first, Candace, about the direction of your work, because we've worked together now for just over a year. Oh yeah, I feel like it was longer than that. But and I noticed that a lot of your work is torso up, and we're focusing on hair, we're focusing on the faces. Where do you see your work evolving?
So I would like to do a series of women, full body, in all shapes and sizes and complexions.
Okay.
And I want it to be uncovered, not because I specifically love nudity, as you know, but I want to create a conversation around people feeling comfortable in their own skin and valuing their bodies as they are.
Okay.
So the skinny mini, the athletic build, the people who are maybe a little bit wider or thicker, like every person, every body. I want to create a body of work that makes everybody feel like their body is valued.
I love that. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know you can do it. Yeah, I'll be around. Totally. Vanessa. So I have to tell this short little story about how I met Vanessa. Because it's really wild how I think people were put in places that were supposed to be. I was at a show at another smaller gallery that you curated. That's right. That's right. And it was a beautifully curated show. But I just kept being drawn by this one work, and it was of 3 little girls, and they had like denim. Their faces were made out of denim, and they were so cute, and I just was drawn to it. And in my mind, I think I even turned to you, not knowing who she was. I turned to her and I was like, "Oh my God, this is the cutest thing." It was just, the work was so adorable. She said, "Yeah, I know, that's mine." I said, "Oh my God." So then we started chatting, and she's telling me about how super talented she is in making clothes, and making housewares, and all sorts of things. And then lo and behold, less than a year later, here we are. And I really literally thought of her work when I was curating the show, and I'm like, I need to get her. So, and you're just kind of beginning in your practice, right?
Yeah, that show, the opening was exactly a year ago from Friday.
Oh wow!
So,
yeah,
so very full circle.
Okay.
And yeah, like you said, I'm still in the beginning, and I think I'm always going to approach my practice as an experiment because I don't like to limit myself creatively, and there's just so many different materials and whatnot to explore. And so when thinking about my art, I think moving forward, it's gonna be mixed media. There's gonna be multiple mediums.
Yeah.
But I also want to tap more into the fact that I'm a seamstress.
Yeah.
The fact that I crochet.
Yeah.
And that's why I love that triptych that she saw, because I incorporated my crocheting and my sewing and my painting. And I want the work that I create in the future to just reflect my creativity and the fact that it's limitless. It can be limitless. And so might see some quilts, you might see some more clothing. I have all these ideas, and just ways to share and convey the stories that I want to, but beyond the canvas.
Right.
I love the canvases, and I think I'm always going to create on canvases, but I don't want to limit myself to that. And so
maybe we can expect some installations from you. Some
Yeah.
things hanging from the ceiling, from the floors. Who knows?
yeah, once I get a studio space, it's over. I'm going to be doing everything that I can. So I don't know. Honestly, like I didn't
Right.
know this was gonna happen a year later, but I'm expected that creatively, like things will only,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Before I get to my final questions and questions from you all, actually, I did want to speak about this triptych, which is my absolute favorite of your work in this show. And again, I gave you guys a little bit of background on where my perspective is from. And my mom was a hairdresser, and this is so my memory of women. And I remember being little and sitting under these big hood hair dryers, and my mom and my aunts laughing at me, like, look at her, she's all right, she's sitting under there like a big grown woman. And it was the immediate thing that I got. What was your inspiration for this? What brought you to this? Because it's very vintage. I love it.
I don't know why, just natural. Well, I wouldn't say I don't know why, but naturally, like most of my pieces have that vintageness. Even a more recent piece, I have like it was inspired by where I'm at in my life now, but it still feels and looks vintage, and I think it's just I gravitate naturally to those colors, and that I naturally want to evoke nostalgia.
Yeah.
Nostalgia makes me feel so good, and so I'm like I want people to feel that too, and people have came to me about this work and other works about how it made them feel like they were in a memory, and it's always a positive memory, thankfully. And these pieces, I just growing up, I don't know how to explain it, but like the beauty salon is such a safe space and it's so important in our culture. And it's a place where we show up as we are and we feel like in community too, because we're always sharing the space with other women. And so I wanted to highlight that because I think that's such a beautiful moment in our culture and in our past, present, and future. Beauty salons are always going to be in business. And I also think a lot about a lot of my works actually. My grandma, she's technically my step grandma, but I knew her all my life. So she's my grandma. And she's a Southern woman, and she like always done up. Always was getting her hair done, nails were always done, just like classic Southern woman. And I think naturally, like she just comes to mind when I create works like this. And yeah, it's just a beautiful moment and a beautiful part of our culture that I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, it's almost like you captured it. You captured it in time. Just It's a snapshot in time.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that. And for you, Candace, I wanted to actually point out the two works on the back, the combs, because I think that was sort of a new aesthetic for you to do an extension of the main piece. Can you talk a little bit about what inspired you to do that?
Sure. So, originally I had this idea of round pieces, and I wanted to make them like cameos. Okay. That was my original thought. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to make these cameos because you don't see black cameos. And then
They're very expensive.
They are. And so I was like mulling over in my head, okay, how do I frame this?
Yeah.
And I wanted specifically with those pieces to celebrate an afro because generally speaking, my hair is very big. And I love my big hair, but it took me some time to love my big hair. And I just wanted to celebrate that, like not tamed in any way, just like it being it and big and up there. And so when I tried to think of like how to frame the piece that celebrates an afro, I was stuck. I was like really stuck because it felt like if I just tried to put like an ornate frame around it, it was not authentic.
Yeah.
to the hair and the meaning behind the piece. And I didn't want to just stick something random around it. Like, I wanted it to feel like it had like purpose and meaning and fit with what I was trying to accomplish and like celebrating just big natural hair. And so I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure it out. And then one night I walked into my bathroom and I had a wooden comb on the sink, and I was like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, the key to keeping your hair healthy is a Y2 comb. That is the one thing that will never fail you. A right comb will do you in, and
unless you
depending on who you talk to, that Denman brush will rip all of your hair out of your head. But you will never hear somebody say that a Y2 comb is going to hurt you. And so I wanted to frame the piece in the combs that help maintain and protect the hair that the piece was designed to celebrate.
Yeah.
So from that, I started making little wooden combs.
Wow. Well, they're beautiful. So I guess my final question is for you. I would love for you to tell us, who is your artistic inspiration and who's your beauty inspiration?
For the artistic one, it's so hard to pinpoint because like I'm always so overwhelmed the best way possible and inspired by so many artists. Like even in DC, when I moved to DC, like I was awestruck because of the talent here, and it's something that I hadn't been exposed to growing up in Florida. And so, yeah, just local artists here, like some in this room, like I'm always in awe. It inspires me and it motivates me to continue to push my own boundaries and create and continue to create and remain committed to this journey. I also thinking about stylists or certain specific art that comes to mind who's like style I love too. Specifically, there's I forgot her name, but she has she does mixed media. I love her work. She has works at the Rubel Museum. They're big pieces. It's like fabric, and it's like the back of a woman squatting. Excuse me?
Julia Richmond Edwards.
I don't think
Tashala.
Yes.
Tashala stuff.
Yes, I love her work.
Yeah.
I love her work, and I love Michelin Thomas. Yes. I love their works. But just in general, there's just so many talented, and specifically talented Black artists here that constantly inspire me. So.
And who's your beauty?
Oh. Because beauty, I think like you were saying, like growing up, it never was a focal point, and like to this day, it's just like when I say like people are Genesis and I, my sister, sorry, I'm like talking like she y'all know who Genesis is. She's right there, but we have this thing like we use the word ugly and beautiful only to describe people first, like how they are internally.
I love that.
Like I will never call somebody physically ugly because I don't believe in that. But like it really is the inside. Like when someone is beautiful on the inside, it radiates. Like to me, you're just a naturally beautiful person. So when you're ugly in the side, no matter how
ugly is ugly.
Like come on, we got some work.
Right.
But yeah, I'd say beauty inspiration. I'm just inspired by the people in my life because I chose them, and I chose them because they're beautiful inside.
Right.
So yeah.
Thank you. How about you, Candace? Who's your artistic inspiration?
Maybe Latoya Hobbs.
Oh, yay!
I really, I am inspired by the way that she uses wood.
And for those of you who don't know who Latoya Hobbs is, she's a master printmaker, painter, and she etches and carves incredible works. You can see her work at the Baltimore Museum of Art. but she's incredible. So. And she's located in Baltimore.
Yeah. I think, I love what she can do with the gouge.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
is, to me,
yeah.
very inspiring. It makes me want to be able to do more with the gouge, I think. So I would say that she's probably my artistic inspiration. I think, to be honest, I appreciate art, and I appreciate art from lots of different people, but I sometimes like to not super study other people because it gives me license to just do what I feel and not try to replicate what I've seen someone else do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Or
That makes
fit
sense.
into a box that other people have created for a type of
Work. Yeah, and we've had this conversation before, right? Because like your work could easily, well, not easily at this point, but in the beginning it could have been put into a box of crafting versus fine art. And I think people like Lisa Butler, people who work in materials that have historically been associated with craft, don't always get catapulted into fine art. And I think your work is pushing that envelope to, because it is fine art, but you have to walk a very fine balance, and it has to be recognized as such. So, and that's not always easy, I can imagine. So having your own vision for your work and maintaining it by not having too many other influences is pretty important, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beauty? Any beauty icons?
Maybe my grandma.
That's a good answer.
Because she's like, she just does her own thing.
Yeah.
And it's so fabulous, like, even when she's not being fabulous, she's like fabulous with it.
Right.
And doesn't really care what anybody thinks.
Yeah.
She's got this rhinestone cowboy hat thing that she wears, and
Okay,
I
Grandma.
don't know.
Yes.
It's fabulous on her.
She should have been at the Beyonce concert.
That she around, shop right in it, and that's her.
I love it.
And I think just it's really like the confidence I
Confidence,
think
yeah.
that she has, and whatever she decides to put on, and however she decides to rock it.
Yeah.
That has been like imprinted.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any final words on where you're headed and what you loved about this show, maybe?
Well, I guess for the second part of the show, I'm so grateful that you allowed me to like bring this idea of yours.
No crying! No crying!
Because if I cry, I can't
I
talk.
thank you more.
But yeah, I think like the work that Candace is doing and just these works in general are so important for people to see. Not even just, I mean, I create work for Black people,
For everybody, yeah.
but also like I want everyone to appreciate and see Black people in this light, like
Yeah.
and you depict it so beautifully through your wood, and I don't want to gas myself up, so I'm not gonna talk about myself. But
You're amazing. I'll say it.
Thank you. And so this is just a really important show, and I appreciate your vision, Adrian, for allowing
Yes.
this space, for
Absolutely.
allowing this to be the space that this can take place in
Absolutely.
a Black-owned gallery. Like that's so important. And yeah, I'm very expectant. I look forward to just more people seeing our works and following our creative journey.
So just the beginning.
Absolutely.
I think for me, the message that I always want anybody to receive when they look at my art or when they contemplate my art is that you are beautiful and perfect just the way you are, just the way God made you, and that you don't have to change a thing about yourself to be worthy of all of the love and respect that you deserve. That is my like underarching. That's why I do what I do. I am extremely grateful to be in this space. I'm grateful to be sharing walls with Vanessa because I think that she's amazing. I am grateful to have the things that I create on a wall in a really well-respected Black-owned gallery. Because you're right, there were a lot of people that looked at what I create and said, "Oh, that's crafty, that's cute." So to be acknowledged as a fine artist is it means something to me. I appreciate that. So to be taken seriously and acknowledged, I am eternally grateful. And excited to continue to make art, to make representative pieces that remind people of the beauty that resides inside of them.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and I'm so thankful to you guys for answering the call, and to Adrian for giving me an opportunity to bring this together, and working with all of you has just been so amazing. So thank you. A little tissues. But I do want to get a few questions from our wonderful audience that's here. I already see a hand. Oh my God, what are you doing here? Okay, Mike, I guess we have to hand the mic over to
Do
you.
you want me to stand up more, or can I sit?
You can stand up.
Hey y'all, how's everybody doing? First and foremost, sorry I'm late. This has been really amazing, and I really sincerely hope the two of you understand how exceptional your talent is. Like, it is exceptional. And I want you two to understand that both of you are part of a lineage of amazing Black artists.
Yes.
You are part of this lineage, and you will continue to be a part of that lineage and that history. So I really, really hope the two of you understand that. Because when I look at your works, the amount of time, first of all, I get scared when you show behind the scenes, you like cutting and stuff. I'm like, please don't hurt yourself. But the two of you, the skill, the eye, the attention to detail and color, even within Candace's works, right? The scope, I mean, it's exceptional, and I really do hope that the two of you understand that. And I have a request of the two of you too at the end. So, because there's something important coming up that I want you all to think about applying for. So, my question is, and I'm sorry, I'm one of those people. Comment for a question. Can you talk a bit about the labor behind your work, right? Because like I said, there's a lot of labor that goes into making these pieces, not just through conception, but the actual physical practice of making your work. Can you talk a bit about how much it takes for you to come up with your concepts? How much does it take for you to be able to get from a piece of wood to sort of bringing all these things together? I think that's really important. It's a part of the story of the piece, right? Bringing all these different components together to sort of make a narrative, to create a story. So could you talk a little bit more about that, please?
I'm loud. Everybody can hear me? You don't have to hear. It's really okay.
Yeah.
I'm so loud. I get it from my dad. He can project very well. So I think usually I start with like the concepts, and everything I draw on my iPad first. And initially I would, draw everything on my iPad, and then that was kind of the end of it. And I have an artist friend, Bria, who like really pushed me. She was like, "You talk all this stuff about different textures. You need to use different species." And I was like, "Uh-huh." And she was like, "You talk all this stuff about different. You need to use the grain. You have to use different species." And I was like, "Okay." So like she really pushed me to do it, and I'm so appreciative of the fact that she did, because it made me expand the way that I create in such like a phenomenal way. Birch, a laser cuts it great. When you start using like darker, heavier woods, the laser is like a joke. A laser is not cutting ebony. A laser will like scratch ebony, and then the ebony is like, haha, I'm still here. One whole piece. You can't touch me. me to really lean into like hand cutting all of these pieces, because the only way that I was going to get it to do what I needed it to do to make the piece come alive was to cut it myself. So now, as I think about creating pieces, it's not just how thick I want the wood to be and how much depth I want it to have, but like, okay, so what is the grain that I want to shine through here? Like, do I want to show some variation in the coloring of the wood because that adds another dimension to what I'm trying to show in the beauty of this person? Do I want to etch the wood and stain it? Do I want to use a piece that is fully another grain of wood and etch into that, because it's very different? If you look at the piece over there, Puffs, if I use a darker wood, if I use like a naturally pigmented wood and I carve into it, the effect of carving into a naturally pigmented wood is very different than the effect of carving into a lighter wood that is stained. And I did both practices, or both techniques on that piece, because I wanted to show just variety in hair. I don't know if that fully answered the question, but I think it does. Like, it forces me, like, the more I experiment with different species of wood, it forces me to also experiment with different ways to treat the wood, and that has become a lot more labor intensive, but it also is a lot more, I think, rewarding.
So starting from the ideas of vision or whatnot, a lot of these start from just like a random vision that I place in, just comes to mind. Of course, they're inspired by my upbringing and these works, like Black culture. And then sometimes I'll be inspired just by everyday living. And you can ask my sister, like, I'll see something and be like, oh my gosh, let me take a photo of this because this is giving me an idea, and then I'll run with it. And in terms of like the process, really, especially with my very mixed media pieces, it's an experiment, and I'm figuring things out as I go. And I have this vision in my head. It's like not 100% clear, but I know the direction. But sometimes I don't know what materials. And so for these, the Labor of Love and these ones, the Labor of Love, I was working on the painting part because I already knew like how I wanted the painting portions to look like. And then I took a pause for 4 months because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do in the background, which is supposed to be the floor. And something came to me. I had thrifted that blanket, that's the background, like 2-3 years ago. And it was under my bed because I just stored it under my bed. So I was like, I don't know why I bought it. I mean, honestly, I had no business buying it. I was just like, it's pretty, it's nostalgic. And then something was like, take it out and see what it looks like. And when I, everything just worked so perfectly how I needed it to. And it gave me that nostalgic feel that I wanted it. And so that was like 8 months of me just like sitting with it, leaving it alone, and then finally something snapped. And then for this one, the material, so the background is actually drawer liners, and there's a lot of research that takes into like figuring out what materials I want to use. I knew I wanted to use something like wallpaper, but the thing with wallpaper is because it's meant for a wall, the pattern to scale would be, like, I'll probably get 1 flower or 2 flowers for, and so I was just randomly searching. I would literally be like adhesive paper with small prints or something like that, and drawer liners popped up. And so when I found this specific drawer liner, I was like, ooh, this is giving me that vintage feel that I want. The floor is actually glossy cardstock. Michael should make me an ambassador because I talk about Michael so much, but I will randomly buy materials that I don't know why I bought it, but I bought that cardstock months ago before this idea came to life. I was like, I don't know, this is cool, like, I'm just gonna have it. And then I was like, this is like tiles,
like, why not incorporate that into, and I literally had just enough for these 2 pieces. I ran out after that. And then the hair dryer was the trickiest part because initially I was going to use like black vinyl because it would be shiny. It looked really cool. And then I remember Lauren did a studio visit and she was like, think about the sustainability. Like, is that gonna last long? Like, you know, plastic. And I remember I left the plastic in the studio. It wasn't ventilated and it like shrunk. And I was like, oh, I can't do this. So I was like, I want something that's translucent and black that they can still kind of see the hair. And this is flower bouquet wrapping paper that I found. And so I'm literally like experimenting and like doing research on like, okay, what materials is going to help me give what I wanted to give. And yeah, so that's where like a lot of the mixed media pieces is just me discovering as I go and trying things out. Things may not work. For this piece, I was going to do actual dried flowers. It looked horrible with the dried flowers. It looked really bad, and then also sustainable wise, it was not going to be sustainable. And so I randomly found again Michael's. I randomly picked some flowers, and I don't know what, but I became a florist because I love how that bouquet came up, and it worked out. A lot of trial and error, but I'm really grateful for the trials because it pushes me to think outside the box. Yeah, and more unconventionally. So, yeah.
Any questions? Yes. I have a question. I can project, but I really suck with the mic, mind you. So let me know if you can hear me. One, I just want to start off by saying what I appreciate about your work specifically because, like, I have been watching you guys for about a year now, this whole time, and like from the moment that I chose your work, you were the first work I chose. That was funny. Like, I specifically vouched for you to have that triptych. Wow. I told them I don't care about the size. I need it because it looks like Powerpuff Girls. It reminded me of me and my little Catholic schoolgirl days, and I was like coming home from elementary school down the street, and I was just like, I'm gonna watch Powerpuff Girls like 3 p.m. But in Candace, like your use of wood, your use of appreciation of the wood, and using that to personify, like, I can get really technical, but I think it's best to just accept what I see first off, and it's because for you, Vanessa, it's just the home, it's like just the feeling of nostalgia, like labor of love. Like, I just, the act of doing hair is always a memory, and then like Candace, like, I loved hearing about how you like layer wood, but I can go on and on about that. But I guess the question is, where are you reacting with the materials? I guess like we talked about the labor, but what led you to this point? Like, why did you choose the wood? Why did you choose fabrics? And why are you now continuing to justify that decision in your work? And how is that shaping you as an artist and your development now?
Yeah, so I think I want to touch on fabric because fabric is very important to me, and I want to incorporate more fabric into my art. And the reason why is because in my family, my grandparents on my dad's side are seamsters. They've been doing that. That's how they sustain their lives all their life. And it's kind of like an ode to them, like my use of fabric. I'm the only grandchild that knows how to sew. And I gotta teach Genesis. She keep on sewing. Just naturally, like I work. What I do to sustain myself is working with denim and fabric, and it just means so much because I feel like I'm embedding like a piece of my family in the work that I'm creating when I use fabric specifically, and when I'm sewing, I'm always thinking of my grandma when I'm sewing, and so I definitely want to like honor them, continue to honor them through my use of fabrics and keep that alive because we're their only grandchildren. I'm the only one that knows how to sew, and so it's like I want to keep that alive, you know. And so yeah, that's when it comes to fabric. That's I want to continue to work. And I want to continue to push my own boundaries as it relates to my use, but just sewing in general and fiber arts specifically, just in general as a whole, because
it was through fiber arts. It was through my middle school fiber arts class that I feel like something clicked, and I was like, oh, I gotta do it. Like, I want to do more art.
You had a fiber arts
And it was
class.
only for a year that they had that program, a year or two. And I randomly took it because it was a home economics class,
Right.
but I don't know what changed.
Wow.
But randomly, it was the same teacher, and she taught us how to sew, how to crochet, how to cross stitch, hand sew and machine sew, and that I ran with it. Like, I crocheted non-stop. It was to the point where I don't like crochet anymore because if I was burnt out, I did it too much. But the fiber arts is where it really started for me, and I want to, and I will really tap into that more moving forward.
So my dad has always built things. He is a carpenter of sorts. He has always built things. He built the deck in the house when I was a kid and the bookshelves, and so and he's the one that taught me how to like use power tools. I know how to use a saw because I watched my dad do it, and then I was like, I can do this, and he was like, and he like made sure that I actually could do it and like not hurt myself. So I think I stumbled upon using wood in my art, and then it felt like home because it was something that I did at home with my dad. And it feels like it contributes to the message that I'm trying to portray in the art that I create. So it feels like a good place to stay. Like, I've tried lots of other things. I've used I sewed for a little while, and I did alcohol ink art, and I did resin art, and all these things, and it was like fun and cute, but it felt like I was still searching to find my voice, I would say, as an artist. And when I started using wood, it felt like this is mine and my voice, and I have the creative freedom to do with it as I wish. And that felt right to me.
One more thing, I do want to add, 'cause I was talking a lot about fibers, but most of these are painting. And I just want to, painting is always going to mean so much to me too, because this was the last medium that I learned and really took seriously. I was so intimidated by painting and painting faces up until 2021 was the first time I attempted a face. And I was like, no, I just need to push myself in. I kept on telling myself, I can't paint face, I can't paint, but I was like, I never really tried it. And now, like, I love painting faces.
And you're painting faces.
Yeah, and so for me personally, like, painting, I proved myself wrong, my misbelief wrong, and I will always continue to paint. I will always push myself as it relates to painting. My choice to paint is acrylic painting, because, like, I'm really proud of myself for doing what I didn't think I could have done most of my life. So, yeah.
Can I ask Candace one last question? Okay, let's take the mic one more time. Okay, so I want to know, because like now I'm like stuck on technique now, and I really see technique. I don't know if it's intentional or not, or if you are thinking about this, but maybe this is something for you to like simmer on for a while. If you can't answer it right away, and that's perfectly okay with me. You say layering wood, and I see where you're trying to layer it. So from what I'm seeing, specifically with this work right here, you chose light wood as a foundation, but then you're allowing the dark wood to protrude, but you only allow that to happen in one or two spots. But then when I go to the painting, painting work of art, I don't even know the word to get it. I would say wood paintings. You decide to layer it again, and yet you allow almost 4 or 5 different colors to come and protrude out. So when I see that, I think of the value scale, but yet I think you're challenging me in that way. And I'm just like, why? Why some things come forward while others seem to sink?
So for this piece, well, in full transparency, like I think the works that are here kind of reflect a little bit of like me growing as an artist. So the first pieces that I created were flat. there was a little bit of there were some pieces that were like removed, or there was depth in that, like there were some carving, yeah. And some there were sections that were omitted, but I didn't build up. It was pretty flat, or it was recessed. That's the right word that I should use. But over time, I started to think that because I wanted to show more of the dimension, not just by color, but also like physically more dimension, in creating the pieces, I started to build up. So like Faded and Blue are older pieces where I initially started to kind of build up, and I was still building up by layering the 1/4 inch birch that I used to create. So I was kind of bound by like the material that I was using and trying to create this level of dimensionality that wasn't there naturally. With a piece like Tribal, which is new, I expanded not just the types of wood that I use, but also the thickness of the wood that I use. So instead of like trying to artificially create depth by stacking, I can just create depth by choosing a wood that is thicker to show more of the dimension that I'm trying to achieve. And with this one, because I was really trying to celebrate that red clay hair and give more to that are, you know, covered in red clay, I really wanted to show more of the dimension. So there are sections that are recessed, there are sections that are that protrude out more, and that's because if you look at somebody's hair, you know, it's not going to be all flat, right? And there are going to be locks that you see that are like deep down and you only see a little piece of it, and there are going to be pieces that are like at the top of your head on the outside that protrude more. And I wanted to give more of that with this piece. Yeah.
No, I really appreciate that. I can get really stuck in depth, but I really appreciate your answer, and it really helped me understand the depth of your work even more. Like, thank you so much for that.
Thank you. And I'd say if anyone else has questions, feel free. The artists will be here for a little while longer. Feel free to chat with them or me. But I, again, thank you all for coming out today. And this has really been a wonderful conversation. Thank you. And feel free to stick around and take a look at the work and have some more mimosas and food and enjoy yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.